up?
Have you ever wondered what would happen
How's it
if you
going?
gave a crystal to a chimpanzee?
Playing
Yeah,
Warcraft 3?
me neither. But a group of researchers in Spain did, and they were curious enough to try to find out. They began by placing large quartz crystals in the outdoor enclosures of chimpanzees at a rescue center near Madrid. The study was led by crystallographer Juan Manuel Garcia Ruiz from the Donostia International Physics Center in Spain. We reached him in Granada.
Juan Manuel, many humans, as you know, are fascinated, attracted to crystals. They believe they have supernatural or healing powers. What do you think about crystals? Do you believe in those kinds of powers?
I don't believe. Actually, I'm studying crystal for many years. I think there is no reason for that. Nevertheless,
And
I
we're
know
just
there are many,
listening to
many
the
people
radio.
who believe on independently
I think we're all set up.
of the culture, the education, the religion. There are many people who believe, and then I was very much interested to try to understand why. And this is one of the reasons why I started this investigation.
So how did chimps come into the picture?
Well, the motivation of the study was that I learned about 10 years ago that the first object that hominid collected since 800,000 years are crystal of quartz and crystal of calcite. Okay, these are a small crystal of 4 centimeters. So they was not useful for them. Scientists, we like experiment, but we cannot do experiment with hominid, at least not yet, right? And then, they said, why not to do the experiment with the help of the species who separated from us about 6 million years ago? There was a chimpanzee. So this is the closest, genetically the closest to us. We share with them about 96% of the genes. So, yeah.
For one of the experiments, you put quartz crystals in the yard where the chimpanzees hang out. How did they react to the quartz crystals?
We actually put two new objects for them. One it was a crystal of 45 centimeters of quartz, and then a stone, similar size, in 2 pedestals, so that they can have, in the morning, and they saw both of them. So we have cameras to measure the interaction with each of them, right? And there was clearly the preference for the single crystal of quartz. The alpha female took the crystal, stay with the crystal for about half an hour, and then go to the platform. They play. 2 other chimpanzees who came, and one of them took the crystal and go to the dormitory, And then in the dormitory, they start to observe the crystal, with different orientation, something absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Did any of it surprise you, their behavior?
Not me, because in some way I was expected that, I think that crystals are extremely singular object in nature. It's different than any other thing that we have in nature. So I wasn't expected. But my team, there was not very much with me, right? But they later realized that there was a really amazing behavior of the chimpanzees with the crystal. Yeah.
So would you say they liked them? They were fascinated by them? They wanted to keep them?
Mm-hmm, exactly. There are 2 basic properties that could be attractive for chimpanzee and for hominid, because this was the aim of the study, of the investigation, is to know why they like it. Basically, there are 2 properties. One of them is transparency. It was one of the major interests of the chimpanzees. And the other one is the shape of the crystal. And this is very important, more difficult to grasp probably, but it's very important because everything in nature is cured and is branched, everything, the clouds, the rock, the plants, the trees, everything is cured or branched except crystals. So crystals are the only polyhedra object in nature.
Shape, the transparency. Did you get all of the crystals back, or are they still hanging on to them?
No, they actually we lost the big one, the big crystal in the first experiment. They took the crystal to the dormitory, and then we need to negotiate with them, offering different kind of food, to have the crystal back. But they stay with the crystal in the dormitory for 1 day. And then the little crystal, because the other experiment, we put pile of pebbles with 20, 25 pebbles and 1 or 2 or 3 crystal in the pebble. And they collected all this crystal and start to be fascinated for the shape and for the transparency of the crystal. And many of them we did not able to know where they took.
They're nice. Why would they let them go?
Yes.
The chimpanzees in your study were raised around human beings. They were rescued and then raised in captivity
yes,
after that. Is that interaction, that experience with humans, do you think that is a factor in how they responded to these crystals?
Yes, I think so. Actually, this was I was in some way worried about, because I said, well, maybe they are already so familiar with the polyhedra, with the straight line, with the flat faces, because the dormitories, even everything. So they already knew polyhedra, right? And then maybe they were not so much fascinated, but it was not the case, actually. They show clearly, and we have the proof and the measurement that they were fascinated by the shape and the transparency. But I really think that we are now planning to do the experiment with wild chimpanzee. The response will be even more radical, more surprising, more amazing.
Why do you think so?
Well, because as I told you, the only object, transparency is a property that the chimpanzees know, because the water is clear, water is transparent, but it's something that they cannot handle. But crystal is the only transparent object that you have in nature. So this is something completely new for them. And the other thing is the shape. There is nothing in nature similar to. So I believe that we offer them in the future, in the next experiment, to offer crystal to chimpanzees. I think that they would be even more amazed,
Juan Manuel, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Juan Manuel Garcia Ruiz is a crystallographer from the Donostia International Physics Center in Spain. He was in Granada. If you walk around downtown Charlottetown, you'll see many pieces of the city's past that have been preserved thanks to Catherine Hennessy. From 1880s architecture to old trees that were due to be cut down. For decades, the former city councillor, teacher, and passionate historian fought to protect the city's heritage and lived by the motto, know it, love it, protect it. Catherine Hennessy died this week. She was 92. In 2001, Ms. Hennessy became a member of the Order of Canada for her work preserving PEI's natural and built heritage. Kim Devine is also a former city councillor. She told the CBC about one example that demonstrates Catherine Hennessy's impact on Charlottetown that will always remind her of her friend.
Well, Catherine is so many things. It's really difficult to narrow down to a few things. But one thing you can say about her is that she is one of the city's most beloved citizens. And she is a force to be reckoned with. She was intelligent, she was witty, she was often outrageous, she was fun, but she was deeply committed to her causes, of which there were many, but some were heritage preservation, good design, and creating places in Charlottetown that made the city a really good place to live. And I think one of the projects that she's most proud of is the bells at the Basilica, which we're hearing right now. I can't believe that we're hearing the bells of the Basilica right now. This is amazing. Anyway, she talked about how when the first church on that site burnt down, they had to build another one, and they needed to find the money. So the Catholics who lived in the downtown and the surrounding areas who were not wealthy people contributed what they could to build this church. And she knew that the bells were underneath the porch in the palace beside the church. They were stored underneath there, and she wanted those bells back up in the tower to honor the people who made those commitment or those contributions to the bells. And I think it was one of her proudest moments that I remember that day on Great George Street when those bells rang for the first time. Hundreds of people turned out, and it was so meaningful for so many people. It was a really, really magical moment, and I think every time when I'm walking in the city of Charlottetown and I hear the bells ringing, I think of Catherine.
That's Kim Devine speaking about her close friend, the late Catherine Hennessy, on Main Street, PEI. Molly Bourne won the Women's U.S. Half Marathon Championship last weekend in Atlanta. And by that, I mean after a punishing 21.1 kilometer run, she crossed the finish line first, breaking through the tape in an astonishing 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 43 seconds. But it turned out that her top standing was the result of a bizarre mix-up that accidentally allowed Ms. Bourne to clinch the top spot. And now USA Track and Field is turning to the World Athletics Council to sort out the chaotic finish. We reached Ms. Bourne in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Molly, breaking through that finish line on Sunday, what did it feel like?
It was very confusing. That's probably the best word for it, because I thought I was going to be getting fourth place. And it took a while for me to kind of realize about what happened, the situation. So yeah, it took a few minutes for someone to tell me that I had actually, technically won the race.
How long before officials came up to you?
So officials came up to me and apologized, but I didn't know what for necessarily. It wasn't until I saw Jessica McLean cross the finish line that I was like, wow, something really bad happened out there on the course. And I was like, oh, and then it was revealed that I had technically won.
So you had crossed the finish line first, but the reason you were confused and thought you were fourth was because Jessica McLean was far and away the leader of this race for most of it, right?
Yes. I knew where I was in the field for pretty much the entire race. So I knew where I was sitting. I knew I was sitting in fifth, and then I knew I was sitting in fourth. And I was far back enough. It's a pretty windy course almost in Atlanta, a lot of turns. So they had a big gap on me. And also I don't really have them in my line of sight all the time because we're constantly turning. So I didn't see them make the wrong turn. I just figured everything was operating as normal. They were just way ahead of me.
The runners that made that wrong turn, including Jessica McLean, did not make that wrong turn on their own or of their own accord. Now that you know what happened, explain for our listeners how they were led astray.
So from my understanding, so Atlanta Track Club has done a really good job kind of getting to the bottom of what went wrong. But they followed the lead motorcade the wrong way, which if I was in their position, I would have done the same thing because that's what runners do. They usually follow the lead car ahead of them and kind of trust it with their lives almost. Now we have more information, and we knew that there was an emergency. An officer got hit by a car maybe like a block away from the intersection. And so officers kind of had to be repositioned. They had to respond to that and move cones to get an ambulance through. So now we know it really just was a series of unfortunate events. It wasn't anyone's competence. It wasn't anything to do with anything. It was just a very unfortunate. And I feel for the officer that got hit. And yeah, I hope everything is right on that end.
Local media is reporting that officer is okay. You've gone online and you've said you certainly don't feel like the winner of this championship. You wanted to say that publicly. Why?
Unfortunately, I am one of the faces of this whole incident, which yeah, I didn't really ask to be, but it just kind of happened that way. And I don't know, I think me saying something, just kind of saying my piece, what, I thought about the situation and what I thought was fair was really important in how things were going to proceed, from that moment, what was going to be done to kind of get some justice for the runners who were so unfortunately let off course.
Have you spoken with Jessica McLean or the others?
Yes, we've been doing a lot of DMing, texting, commenting on each other's posts. These were women I, of course, know of because it's a pretty small running community, but I hadn't met until kind of the weekend of the race.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're like great humans, and everyone has been acting so professionally and so understanding of each other's situations and how everyone else is feeling.
As the winner, you're getting $20,000. The organizers, the Atlanta Track Club, said that Jessica McLean and the two other runners are going to receive their prize money as well. The standings are another issue. USA Track and Field initially said the results are going to stand, but now they want the World Athletics Council to decide what happens next. What, in your view, would be the ideal outcome? I mean, do you expect to be taking part in those other races, or do you think that the others should get to?
I think it's pretty clear that the three women who are let off course should represent the U.S. Half marathons by mile 12, you're pretty locked into your spot. I mean, I've only raced a few half marathons, but I know enough to know that like those three women would have finished top three, almost certainly, barring tragedy. And they would be our strongest team on the world stage. So of course I think they should go. And I absolutely do not need the spot. I would probably feel kind of like a fraud being up there, on the world team, knowing that I should not necessarily be there.
The reaction you were talking about, your own reaction and just the communication between everyone, it suggests a lot about you personally, your competitors, but also, just in general, the sport, or at least this group of competitors in that sport. How are you feeling about the sport in general?
I am like 100% confident that any woman who finished right behind me would be doing the same thing in my situation. Distance running is a pretty hard thing to do and compete at. And we're all aware of the sacrifices of distance running and the heartbreak that the top three women are feeling. And so, I'm confident that anyone else in my situation would be doing the exact same thing and saying the same exact things.
Molly, I'm glad we could speak. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Molly Bourne is a professional runner. She was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Davy Boy Smith, also known as the British Bulldog, was a pro wrestling great, the brother-in-law of Canadian legend Bret Hart, and a heel character who often baited the crowd across his decades-long career.
I'm telling you and all these idiots out here tonight that the British Bulldog has got all the confidence in the world. The World Wrestling Federation title is mine this Sunday at King of the Ring.
Davy Boy Smith died at just 39 years old, and after his death, his WWE Hall of Fame ring went to his son, who wrestles under the name Davy Boy Smith Jr. Last week, the ring was stolen from his trailer in a parking lot in Lloydminster, Alberta. The younger wrestler appealed to the public, and when someone looking to sell the ring turned up at a Lloydminster thrift store, owner Craig Hubbard sprung into action.
At the time, I already knew the news on Facebook and pretty much all over the place that this ring had been stolen. So I asked my employee while I was looking at it to phone the RCMP and tell them that the ring was at my store and the gentleman was in front of me trying to sell it to me. And so what I did was just basically like I normally do when I buy gold, is just kind of look at it. And at the time, I was just basically trying to keep him in the store as long as I could without any confrontation. And eventually, the RCP wasn't there yet, so I told them that ring was actually stolen a few days ago, and I wasn't able to give it back to him, and that the RCMP would be there shortly. And he came behind the counter and told me to give it back to him as he wanted a reward for it. And I said, no, you're not going to have the ring back. I said, it's stolen. And at that time, the RCMP showed up and arrested him.
Wow. Was it just by chance that you had seen that Facebook post that it was stolen?
Yeah, I really don't think I would have known it was stolen if I hadn't have seen the Facebook post or the social media about it. And then I also noticed the names inside that were involved in the ring and the family, like the Hart and the Smith. They were all in there. So,
right.
Like, in all fairness, the ring is actually not gold, but but I wanted to make sure that the rightful owner got their ring back.
Did you watch the British Bulldog growing up?
I did growing up, yes. I was big into wrestling in the 90s. I used to watch quite a bit of it. So, yes, I do know who that was. And I just learned lately that, that was his son, and he had received the Hall of Fame ring on behalf of his dad. I do know that story, that, so I wasn't really, familiar with him himself. So,
yeah.
But I knew it was a very special ring, and for the family, I'm assuming, and I was just happy that this guy came in to try to sell it, and I was able to recover it for him.
Crazy. So, you said the ring wasn't real gold?
No, it wasn't. It was plated.
Think that was Vince McMahon's doing?
Oh, probably, yeah.
Craig Hubbard is the owner of You Betcha thrift store in Lloydminster, Alberta. He spoke to Peter Mills on CBC's The 306. The resonant, deeply alluring cries of a male kakapo seeking a mate. You may remember hearing them on this show before, though I'm not really sure how he got in here. As you may know, the kakapo is a critically endangered flightless parrot from New Zealand. They're bright green, adorably rotund, nocturnal, and according to those who work closely with them, emitters of a distinctive musk. Nice. The birds remain rare, in part because their reproductive needs are a little extra. They only deign to do it every few years, and only when one particular tree, the Rimu tree, has a mass fruiting season. As we told you in January, this year was looking like a bumper crop for the Rimu, and everyone was hoping that produce would produce a lot of reproduction, especially this guy. Okay, settle down. And now I'm happy to report that hope bore fruit. The kakapos have been engaged in, what's the technical term? A mating frenzy. They've produced 139 fertile eggs so far, putting them on track for a record season. The enthusiastic efforts are being closely monitored via transmitters used to track the birds. Some may say too closely. As one scientist told the New York Times, quote, "We can see if they're nesting. We can even see who has mated and who they've mated with and how long they've mated for." Okay. Still, without human intervention, things can go awry. They've already had to remove one male, Blades, from the breeding system for over-reproducing and narrowing the gene pool, showing, I guess, that you can't always just allow nature to take its intercourse. Wait, Blades? Is that you? Be quiet, you're fine. Here's Daft Punk with Get Lucky.
Well, this is going to get copyrighted. But we'll just jam with it, I guess.
Like the legend of the phoenix, with beginnings. What keeps the planet spinning? The force from the beginning. Love. We've come too far to give up who we are. So let's raise the bar and our cause to the stars.
Daft Punk with Get Lucky, taking us to the end of As It Happens on Friday, March 6th.
As It Happens was produced this week by Leslie Amundsen, Cassie Argyle, James Sharani, Nishat Chowdhury, Livia Dyring,
Sheena Goodyear, Chris Harbord, Laura Hindle, Sarah Jackson, Morgan Passy, and Chris Trowbridge.
Reynolds Gonzalez is our technician, Devin Nguyen is our director, Chris Howden and my co-host tonight, Lisa Bryn Rundle, are our writers. Our intern is Eden Chipperfield. Chloe Shantz Hilkes is our senior producer, and the executive producer of As It Happens is Austin Webb.
We'd also like to thank some other people who helped us out this week. Michelle McDougall in Brandon, Allison Dempster in Calgary, Mary Catherine McIntosh in Halifax, Susan McKenzie in Montreal, Andrew Kuryada in Prince George, Emma Godmere in Ottawa, Phil Drost in St. John, Marcus Medford Kerr, Emma Smith, Brandy Wakely, Luke Williams in Toronto, Sarah Berman, Ann Penman and Catherine Zhu in Vancouver, Katie DeRosa in Victoria, and Suzanne Dufresne in Winnipeg. I'm Lisa Bryn Rundle. As It Happens, we'll be back Monday.
And I'm Neil Kirksall. Enjoy your weekend.
I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to get lucky.
This is CBC Radio 1, 740 AM and 93.9 FM in Edmonton.
Hi, I'm Mae Martin, host of the Junos, Canada's biggest night in music, which means big moments, big stars, and me trying very hard to stay calm, especially with an amazing lineup of performances by Arkells, The Beaches, Daniel Caesar, William Prince, and more. Plus special appearances by Nelly Furtado and Joni Mitchell. I'm so excited. I'm doing backflips. Don't miss the Junos. Live March 29th at 8 Eastern on CBC and CBC Gem. Let's get this party started.
The CBC News is next, followed by Ideas with Nala Ayed.
The ideals behind human rights have an ancient history, but that changed in the 6 years after World War II and the Holocaust. Find out how and why, coming up on Ideas.
From CBC News, The World This Hour, I'm Neil Kumar. As the war expands, the U.S. president is demanding nothing short of Iran's unconditional surrender. Paul Hunter is in Washington with the latest on Donald Trump's new threat and what it could mean.
Missile after missile was again fired from the sea with word from the U.S. its actions have only just begun. From the U.S. president, a blunt message delivered on his Truth Social platform. There will be no deal except unconditional surrender.
We've taken out
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt soon after.
What the president means is that when he, as commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, determines that Iran no longer poses a threat to the United States of America and the goals of Operation Epic Fury has been fully realized, then Iran will essentially be in a place of unconditional surrender, whether they say it themselves or not.
Leavitt added the U.S. is well on its way to that, with the latest expectation being it'll take 4 to 6 weeks to get there. On reporting that Russia is now aiding Iran with intel that could help Iran in striking U.S. forces.
It clearly is not making a difference with respect to the military operations in Iran.
Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Not all the damage from the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran is being felt in the Middle East. All around the world, people are anxiously watching the price of oil rise, and that could drive up inflation. Nisha Patel has more.
About 20 million barrels of oil usually pass through the narrow strait between Iran and Oman every day. But Iran is attacking tankers, making the route much more dangerous. And oil-producing countries like Iraq are running out of storage. Nearly 1/5 of the global oil supply is being choked off, sending crude oil prices soaring to almost $91 a barrel, up 35% since the conflict began. It's the biggest weekly gain ever. Qatar's energy minister warned if the strait remains shut, Oil could hit $150 a barrel within 2 weeks.
Further action to reduce pressure on oil is imminent.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he can get oil exports moving again, offering up a $20 billion program to insure tankers from any losses. But energy won't move freely until attacks on ships stop altogether. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
High-level trade talks are back on between Canada and the U.S. months after Donald Trump shut them down. Canada's trade minister is now in Washington meeting with his American counterpart. But as Kate McKenna found out, he's not saying much.
What do you hope to accomplish from these talks? Minister, anything to say at all?
As he left a meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, Canada's point person for U.S. Trade Dominic LeBlanc refused to talk. But in a statement released after the meeting, LeBlanc's office said he introduced Canada's new trade negotiator, Janice Charette, and Ottawa's new ambassador to the U.S., Mark Wiseman. It says they had a constructive and substantive discussion about the upcoming review of the free trade agreement and other issues affecting both countries. The stakes are very high. A review of the free trade agreement is set to happen later this year. Trump has signaled he wants changes. And earlier this week, Carney said when the U.S. slapped tariffs on Canadian goods like steel, aluminum, and auto parts, the administration blew up part of the deal.
That agreement effectively has been broken by U.S. actions.
Carney says the review could get things back on track. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Washington.
A funeral was held in Chicago today for the late Reverend Jesse Jackson. Former Presidents Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Bill Clinton were all in attendance, as well as artists, clergy, and various elected officials. The memorial took place at a 10,000-seat arena on the city's south side. It follows other services that drew large crowds both in Chicago and in South Carolina, where the civil rights leader was born. Jackson died last month at the age of 84. And that is the world this hour. For CBC News, I'm Neil Kumar.
Here is the forecast for the city of Edmonton. A low of +2 overnight, but the temperature rising to 6 degrees by the morning. On the way up to a high of 10 on Saturday under a mixed sky. It's going to be windy as well. For Sunday, sunshine and a high of +1. Monday, sunny and 0. Tuesday, sunny and -2. Wednesday, a few clouds and +1. And then flurries on Thursday as it cools to -6 for a daytime high.
Please join me in welcoming the 2025 Massey Lecturer, Alex Neve.
Welcome to Ideas. I'm Nala Ayad.
Thank you. That was lovely.
That's Alex Neve walking out on stage at the York Theatre in Vancouver to join CBC Radio's Laura Lynch.
So let me tell you about Alex Neve, who is someone that I know. In my previous incarnations at the CBC, I have talked to Alex many times about human rights in Canada, and I've always appreciated Alex's insight, and particularly his speed in replying when I was on deadline. Alex is a human rights lawyer who served as Secretary General of Amnesty International Canada from 2000 to 2020. So tonight, Alex Neve will be exploring ideas about human rights that we've inherited from past generations. And
Since their inception in 1961, the CBC Massey Lectures have explored some of the most pressing issues of our time. And in today's world, few issues are as pressing as human rights.
The need to embrace the full universality of the promise of human rights in our world at a time when our common humanity and even the future of our planet is so desperately frayed and tested.
Alex Neve's Massey Lectures are called Universal, Renewing Human Rights in a Fractured World.
Fractures that have ruptured the human rights of billions of people, but fractures that can be healed by a true embrace of the universal promise.
In such a fractured world, revitalizing the idea of universal human rights may offer a path forward. But to get there, Alex argues we must first look back to where that universal promise began.
Lecture 2. Go back and get it. Human rights lessons from history.
And one essential word sets it all in motion.
Universal, constant, continual, perpetual. Letitia Mansourari and I sat in front of the small wooden shelter in the Masakundu refugee camp, where she lived with several of her children and grandchildren, while she tended to a smoldering fire and a pot of millet porridge. The camp outside the city of Kisidugu was one of many in the Parrots Beak region, an isolated corner of Guinea in West Africa. It was March 2001. Letitia was in her 60s and had fled from neighboring Sierra Leone several years earlier, joining thousands of other refugees from both Sierra Leone and Liberia. The horrifying human rights violations that tore those two countries apart during much of the 1990s were soul-destroying. So much of the violence involved children. Brutal abuses against children, often carried out under duress by other children. For years, refuge in Guinea was safe, but no longer. As the conflict had shifted in Sierra Leone, fighters with that country's notorious rebel group, the Revolutionary United Front, or RUF, had crossed the border. And no one was safe, certainly not refugees. The security situation was tense, with constant rumors of RUF attacks in the area. Guinean security forces had started to view Sierra Leonean refugees with suspicion, even though they were the ones with the most to fear from the rebels. There had been an arbitrary sweep through the camp the day before, and local gendarmes had arrested dozens of refugees on groundless accusations that they were supporting the rebels. Fear was palpable everywhere we went in the camp. At one point, while I was sitting with Letitia, there was a commotion next door. A man who had been arrested in the previous day's sweep had been released and returned to his family. We took a break to hear his account. Ominously, he warned that the welcome that refugees had enjoyed in Guinea was wearing off. Letitia knew the toll of Sierra Leone's war firsthand. Her husband had been killed years earlier by the RUF when their village was attacked. Other family members had been badly injured at various times. She did not know what had become of her nephew, who, while still a young boy, had been abducted and had likely been forced to join the rebels' fighting ranks. They were known to recruit, abuse, and kill thousands of children. Now, as they carried out attacks in Guinea, Letitia was above all fearful that her grandchildren would meet the same fate as her nephew. I could tell that she was not letting them out of her sight. Letitia was holding her family together. Among my many questions, I asked Letitia what changes in Sierra Leone would make it safe enough to return home. I was looking ahead, but she was clear in her answer. In order to be sure about where we need to go, we have to understand where we have come from. The lawyer and human rights researcher in me was focused on passing UN Security Council resolutions, strengthening UN peacekeeping, and prosecuting war criminals. Letitia reminded me, though, that if any of those measures were to succeed, first we needed to look back to history. How the fighting she had fled in Sierra Leone revolved around control of the country's lucrative diamond fields. She took me back to a time when her own father illicitly mined for diamonds in Kono, in the east of the country, hopeful that a significant find might lift their family out of poverty. She talked of the various international mining companies that had come and gone, generally leaving communities in worse shape. She recounted when control of the diamond fields was wrested away by the rebels. That is when the violence became so extreme that her family had to flee. She explained, it has always been about the diamonds. Everyone has always cared about the diamonds, and no one has ever cared about us. It was obvious to her that unless that long history was addressed, and there was as much care for people as there was for diamonds, nothing would change. We have to understand where we have come from. Let me start at the very beginning, literally. Across time, across religions, cultures, and peoples, human creation parables are all drenched in life's sacredness. In Maori tradition, Tane, the god of the forest and all that lives in it, created the natural world. He molded Haine Ahone, the first woman, from sacred red clay. Tane breathed life into her through a sacred exchange of breath, and thus the spirit entered her body, symbolizing the divine connection between humans, the gods, and the earth. The sacredness of life is reinforced in the many religious and spiritual commandments not to kill and to save life. The Quran teaches that whoever kills a soul has killed all of humanity. The principle of ahimsa, from a Sanskrit word meaning without violence, is one of the highest truths in Hinduism and Jainism. Judaism and Christianity's sixth commandment is unambiguous: thou shalt not kill. The sacred primacy of life comes through in stories told by philosophers. Mencius, a disciple of Confucius, told the tale of King Hui, who asked Mencius how he could make his realm prosper, believing the answer lay in military might. Mencius told the king that to neglect the lives and well-being of his people while enriching himself was like trying to fill a leaking pond without stopping the leak. It will never be full. Life must come first. Little surprise then that in Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we find everyone has the right to life. We must ask ourselves, though, how have we come to live in a world that allows life's sacredness to be so readily defiled and desecrated in Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine, and countless other conflict zones? Do we understand what it is for a life, every life, truly to be sacred? Our journey has gone beyond cherishing the sacredness of each individual life. We have embraced a deep understanding that we are all dependent upon one another, and we are all inextricably interconnected. One of the most concise expressions of our common humanity is found in the African concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are. Ubuntu's origins are said to lie in a Zulu proverb, which affirms that a person is a person through other people. The idea of our common humanity has also been embraced in philosophical conceptions of natural justice and rights in Western Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. Immanuel Kant stirringly captured the universal solidarity that lies at the heart of our common humanity, crying out that a transgression of rights in one place in the world is felt everywhere. Writing during the Enlightenment, those philosophers, mostly men, were by no means universally inclusive in their vision of common humanity, generally focusing only on themselves, most likely property-owning white men of means. But others, writing at the same time and far too often overlooked today, lifted up a truly universal vision of our common humanity, including Olympe de Gouges, who wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Woman and of the Female Citizen in France, and in England, Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Women, and the powerful memoir, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vassa, the African. Martin Luther King Jr. offers what I have always felt to be one of the most evocative images of our common humanity. In his speech accepting the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, the rich must not ignore the poor because both rich and poor are tied in a single garment of destiny. The agony of the poor diminishes the rich, and the salvation of the poor enlarges the rich. A single garment of destiny is a wonderful metaphor for our common humanity. A singular garment that we wear together, made up of a rich tapestry of individual threads. Each thread on its own can be easily broken, but interwoven, they become strong and beautiful with a united destiny and shared purpose. That single garment of destiny is indeed the universal promise of human rights. Recognition that life is sacred and that we share a common humanity compels us to treat one another with respect and reciprocity. The sacredness of life and the strength of our common humanity will rise or fall on the back of how much respect we receive and how much we offer. That is what motivates the many religious and spiritual expressions going back millennia of what is often referred to as the Golden Rule, the principle that we should treat others as we would want to be treated ourselves. The Golden Rule is foundational in Islam. Not one of you truly believes until you wish for others that which you wish for yourself. In Christianity, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And in Judaism, whatever is hateful and distasteful to you, do not do to your fellow man. It finds expression in a West African Yoruba proverb, extending that reciprocity to the natural world around us. Whenever a person breaks a stick in the forest, let him consider what it would feel like if it were himself who was thus broken. I feel like that one says so much to us today as both we, humanity, and our planet reel from the catastrophic impact of the climate crisis. Today, my heart goes to the destructive and deadly rampage of Super Typhoon Ragasa, tearing through the Philippines, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China. U.S. historian Paul Gordon Lauren beautifully suggests that all of the great religious traditions share a universal dissatisfaction with the world as it is and a determination to make it as it ought to be. It is not only a religious perspective, it has become the catalyst for social and political movements through the ages. How often have many of us been out in the streets shouting along with others the hopeful and insistent chant of social justice? A better world is possible. Fairness and freedom have long been signposts to what that better world ought to be. The presumption of innocence, for instance, a basic human rights safeguard of fairness, first appears 3,800 years ago in ancient Babylonia's Code of Hammurabi. The Magna Carta, more than 800 years ago, established that no one, even the monarch, is above the law and that no one can be detained without lawful judgment. In 1762, French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in the opening line of his seminal work, The Social Contract, issued his famous rallying cry, "Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains." In quick succession, revolutions in the United States, France, and Haiti powerfully took up that desire to break the chains, and the language of human rights emerged like never before, not only capturing, but constitutionally enshrining that yearning for fairness and freedom. Across the globe, that yearning is irrepressible and ultimately invincible, despite the determined efforts of governments to extinguish and crush it. Tonight, I am thinking of Egyptian-British activist Alaa Abdel Fattah, who has long refused to be silent to injustice in Egypt and has paid a very high price in fairness and freedom. Years ago, at the Al Jazeera studio in London, he told me that even with everything he had endured, he would not change a thing, and how bolstered he felt by global solidarity. He has again unfairly and unlawfully been denied his freedom for the past 6 years. His courageous mother, Laila, has waged hunger strikes to win his freedom. People the world over have demanded his freedom, and now finally he is free. If only we could end there. Perhaps unexpectedly, considerable encouragement can be drawn from looking back. Life is sacred. We live in common humanity. We owe and must treat each other with respect, and we are guided by fairness and freedom. Imagine my conversation with Letitia if those were the principles that truly shaped her world, our world, in 2001. Surely the Revolutionary United Front, the mining companies, local security forces would have all behaved differently. Surely she would not be fearful of letting her grandchildren out of her sight, the world as it ought to be, not as it is. While looking back brings these principles to life, we see also how wantonly they are dishonored. No matter our unshakable determination to keep faith with and even strengthen human rights promises, humanity's capacity for violence, cruelty, and subjugation has also prevailed, which invites one of the most basic existential questions of humanity. Are we inherently good or inherently evil? Is our journey one of goodness seeking to keep evil away, or evil striving towards better selves? This was the great debate thousands of years ago between Confucian philosophers Mencius, who was of the view that human nature is good, and Junji, who held the contrary view that human nature is bad. All is not lost, however, as Junji also held that people desire to become good because their nature is bad. To reach that goal, Junji said, people need help from outside forces. Is that not precisely what the universal promise of human rights offers? Scaffolding to hold our better selves in place. It is telling that repeated betrayals of our ideals have not squelched our belief in the promise. Betrayal has, in fact, often fueled new and greater resolve. It has inspired the next philosopher or prophet and catalyzed the next revolution. Along the way, the difference between right and wrong and between just and unjust has become more apparent. And this pendulum swings over the centuries. The racist conquest of 500 years of colonialism, for instance, ignited the fight to abolish slavery. The pendulum certainly swung between good and evil through the early part of the 20th century, when in quick succession the First World War, the Spanish flu pandemic, and the Great Depression unleashed catastrophic death and suffering. These were followed, however, by treaties to end the First World War, which included historic provisions for the protection of minorities, the establishment of the League of Nations, and the Permanent International Court of Justice. Canada responded to the influenza pandemic by creating our first ever federal Department of Health. And the ravages of the Great Depression in the United States inspired Franklin Roosevelt to launch the ambitious New Deal, a seismic shift in understanding the role of governments in providing a basic level of economic security for everyone. What followed next, however, was the pendulum's most vicious swing.
You're listening to the second of the 2025 CBC Massey Lectures. This is Ideas. I'm Nala Ayed. The ideals behind the concept of human rights, such as reciprocity, fairness, and the sacredness of life, have millennia-old histories. After the carnage of the Second World War and the Holocaust, human rights took a new legal form. In the second of his CBC Massey Lectures, Alex Neve considers the 6 dizzying years that laid out a blueprint for a new world, and the wisdom, challenges, and tensions we've inherited from them. From the York Theatre in Vancouver, here again is Alex Neve with Go Back and Get It, Human Rights Lessons from History.
Carnage of the Second World War reached all corners of the earth. 72 million civilians and soldiers were killed. That the lives of 6 million Jews and others were extinguished in the Holocaust showed us that there were no limits to the horrors humans were prepared to inflict upon each other, and to do so hiding in plain sight of nearby communities and the world at large, normalized through banal laws and macabre record keeping. How could that have not demolished even the slightest faith anyone might have held that promises of our common humanity meant anything? The global landscape was riddled with calamity in those post-war years, including unprecedented levels of forced displacement and national economies in tatters, with overwhelming shortages of food, fuel, and other essentials that, if anything, became worse in peacetime. And the catastrophic implications of the nuclear age had dawned. Even if they couldn't yet fully grasp the horrors and dangers they faced, in the ruins of the Second World War, people understood that humanity stood on that precipice, and thus the need for a turning point. Speaking to representatives of 50 countries in April 1945 at the opening of a 2-month conference in San Francisco, tasked with designing the blueprint for a post-war international order, U.S. President Harry Truman laid out the path. Justice remains the greatest power on earth, he said. To that tremendous power alone will we submit. 6 months later, on October the 24th, 1945, the war had ended, and the United Nations and the International Court of Justice officially came into existence. This raw, violent moment in human history could so easily have been a time to retreat to victor's triumph, bigger armies, fortified borders, unilateralism, and domination. It could understandably have been a time to become inward-looking, defiant, and defensive. Yet instead, in the first article of the Charter, laying out the United Nations' 4 primary purposes, human rights are in the spotlight like never before. To achieve international cooperation in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, sex, language, religion. And notably, the Charter was not written in the voice of presidents, royalty, and generals, nor of nations, states, or governments. Instead, it opens in the name of "We the Peoples of the United Nations." An earlier draft used the more traditional and dull international legal terminology of a charter being enacted by high contracting parties. The soaring, almost oratorical language of "We the Peoples" came from the U.S. delegation, echoing similar words that begin the U.S. Constitution. And notably, the inspiration for those words came from Virginia Gildersleeve, the only woman on the U.S. delegation in San Francisco and one of the very few women on any country's delegation, along with Sol Bloom, the only Jewish member of the U.S. delegation. "We the Peoples" set the stage for the aspiration and promise of human rights to carry more solemn significance and weight. And what was it that the people were declaring? It was our determination to achieve 4 vital goals: to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, to maintain justice and respect for international law, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. Having created the United Nations and doing so in the name of "We the Peoples," states set out at a frenzied pace now to demonstrate their determination to bring the promise of human rights concretely to life. It was something the world had never witnessed before. And what guided their effort is a vision that both teaches us and illuminates much of what we confront today. In the span of only 6 years, absolutely inconceivable in the glacial pace of today's multilateral world, they took decisive and historic steps to advance international justice, tackle genocide, commit to universal human rights, protect civilians in times of war, and protect refugees. Entrenched impunity has long been the great ally of human rights violators. As early as 1943, however, the US, British, and Soviet governments had agreed that German officers and members of the Nazi Party, who were responsible for atrocities, massacres, and cold-blooded mass executions, should face justice and be punished for their crimes. Once the war ended, steps were taken almost immediately to deliver on that promise, later extended to Japan as well. The Nuremberg and Tokyo War Crimes Tribunals were set up in 1945 and 1946. Over several years, more than 200 German and Japanese military officers, political leaders, professionals, and industrialists were tried on charges of crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. It was, in fact, the first time in history that individuals had been charged and tried with the new offense of crimes against humanity. Notably, the focus of crimes against humanity was entirely on civilians, whereas war crimes, to that point in time, had largely focused on soldiers, particularly when wounded or taken prisoner. The Nuremberg Tribunal ruled that the persecution of the Jews at the hands of the Nazi government had been proved in the greatest detail before the tribunal. It is a record of consistent and systematic inhumanity on the greatest scale. This was a watershed moment. The universality of human rights was, for the first time ever, being enforced through the power of law. A strong message that delivering the promise of human rights required justice and accountability for egregious violations. However, this did not mean that international justice was going to be universal justice. It was decidedly left to the victors to dispense justice, which did not extend to themselves. There was certainly no move to consider criminal charges against US and British officials responsible for the firestorm bombing of the German city of Dresden, US leaders who decided to drop those cataclysmic nuclear bombs on Japan, or Soviet officers who carried out mass executions of Polish prisoners of war at Katyn, all of which could credibly have given rise to charges of war crimes or crimes against humanity. It was nonetheless history-making to see that international justice had arrived on the world stage, though it would be decades before states returned to it and began to truly take it forward, notably through establishment of the International Criminal Court in 2002. The imperative to not be selective and to go the distance in delivering universal justice is still very much in front of us in 2025. Well evidenced by the fact that while 2/3 of the world states have endorsed the court, 1/3 have not, including the United States, Russia, China, Israel, and India. Justice, while promised to us all, clearly does not yet belong to us all. The powerful new definition of crimes against humanity articulated in 1945 did not, however, fully capture the scale and horror of the Holocaust. In a speech in 1941, Winston Churchill noted that the world was in the presence of a crime without a name. A Polish Jewish lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, had remarked similarly in response to earlier unimaginable atrocities, the massive orchestrated massacres of Armenians in Turkey during the First World War under Ottoman Empire rule. At the time, Lemkin wondered, why was killing 1 million people a less serious crime than killing a single individual? Raphael Lemkin fled from Poland after the Nazi invasion in 1939, eventually reaching the United States. And he was determined that a new offense under international law was needed to capture the true nature of what he called the most heinous of all crimes. He termed it genocide. On December the 9th, 1948, in one of the UN's first instances of significant lawmaking, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide was adopted. Genocide was coined and defined for the first time in international law as extending to 5 specified acts: killing, serious bodily or mental harm, destructive conditions of life, preventing births, and forcibly transferring children when committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. The crime that had no name now had one. The Genocide Convention packs a remarkable amount into its relatively short 19 articles. There is a focus on obligations to both prevent and punish genocide, obligations that rest with all state parties, not just the government carrying out the genocide. But the convention is intent on preventing genocide, not only responding to it after the fact, is essential. To Armenians and to Jews and to all humanity, a promise had been made. Too late to address the horrors of the past, but so necessary to avoid similar horrors in the future. Never again. There is a less encouraging footnote to the story of the drafting of the Genocide Convention, namely whether or not it would specifically outlaw cultural genocide. Lemkin asserted that genocide encompassed more than mass killings. In his view, it also occurred when there was a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, including the disintegration of the culture and language of the group. Canadian officials, even in 1948, were aware that cultural genocide very likely encompassed this country's treatment of Indigenous peoples. And so Canada joined other countries in objecting to including such a provision in the convention. They succeeded, and it was cut from an early draft. Explicitly included in the convention or not, 67 years later, the final report of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission made it clear that Canada was indeed responsible for cultural genocide. So looking back reminds us there is unfinished business today. The history of genocide against Indigenous peoples in Canada has been both physical and cultural. We are not spared that reality by having expunged the reference to cultural genocide from the convention in 1948. And 80 years after there was a promise to end genocide, we are forced to face its horrors in Gaza, against the Rohingya, and in other corners of our world. So going back gives us an opportunity to recuperate and to keep the promise. The day after adopting the Genocide Convention, the United Nations took another enormous step, one set on firmly placing human rights at the heart of the emerging New World Order. On December the 10th, 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted, the culmination of close to 2 years of work undertaken by a drafting group under the auspices of the UN's new Commission on Human Rights, which included a Canadian, John Humphrey. For the first time in history, a legal document had been proclaimed, laying out the rights and freedoms of all peoples throughout the world. In its preamble, the Declaration observes that recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. A powerful affirmation that respecting human rights is not only its own imperative, but is also a cornerstone to other goals, notably world peace. The very first word in the Declaration's title, universal, commits clearly and succinctly to the promise of common humanity. To use that term, rather than the words more usually seen in the titles of treaties and declarations, such as international or perhaps United Nations, is of note and was certainly deliberate. It is an ode to our common humanity. This vision of universality was shaped by the millennia that had come before. For example, Chinese diplomat P.C. Chang, who was a key member of the drafting committee, frequently referenced 2,500-year-old Confucian teachings and ideals in support of the Declaration's principles and wording, in arguing for social and economic rights provisions to be included, which they were in Articles 22 through 26, he noted that when the grand way prevails, the world is for the welfare of all. People regard not only their own parents as parents, nor only their own children as children. All of that said, Canada had a less than stellar beginning with the Universal Declaration. In the first vote,
CBC is home to the Paralympic Games. Yeah. Swipe, scan, and scroll to get the Paralympic action you're looking for. From live streams to event replays, CBC Gem is your exclusive ticket to the Paralympic Winter Games.
The R, the A, the H, the D, the I, the G, the G, the A. The R, the A, the H, the D, the I, the G, the G, the A. The R, the A, the H, the D, the I, the G, the G, the A. The R, the A, the H, the D, the I, the G, the G, the A. The R, the A, the H, the D, the I, the G, the G, the A. The R, the A, the H, the D, the I.
What's that spell? Rod Digger. She is a female MC, part of the 90s wave of female MCs. I call that the third wave of female MCs. You know, Lauryn Hill. That was the era of Foxy Brown, Missy Elliott. Can't forget Bahamadia. Lady of Rage, Da Brat, Lil' Kim. You know what I'm talking about? You heard what they call me as I come to my last few for you. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Angeline Tedaweo, as promised. I'm going to change up the pace with music of a more gentle and jazzy variety. I've got Ego LMA on the way after Adria Kane. When this song was released in February, it was immediately selected by CBC Music as a song you need to hear.
And what was the idea that you had?
So, far be it from me to ignore that advice as we find Adria Kane again distilling love into a subtle but potent potion. Here is Maybe.
What if I didn't stay? I took heed of enough that makes me want to run away. But it's hard not to feel like you weren't chosen for me. My sugar darling, you're all that I need. Just when I think that you were listening, you sing a song that makes it all crystal clear. I'll fall apart whenever you go away. Need you to leave me with some reassurance, babe. That I got you, baby. I got you, baby. I got you, baby. I got you, baby. I've been running out of reasons to love, 'cause I've tried it all 1,000 times before. Since you've come along, I've been hesitant to let you in, but somehow you've made it hard to go. Give me a sign that you're really listening. Please let me know that it'll be different here. And I can can promise to never lead you astray. But I need you to leave me with some reassurance, babe. That I got you, baby. I got you, baby. I got you,
Can we both take a moment? I started getting so comfortable. Don't recall how this started, but I know I'm into you. It's a little uncharted. Tell me how you've been doing. How did we get so cynical?
Just gonna run to the lab real quick.
Sinking deep in the tension. I'm a little miserable. Can you pull me out of it? Tell me why it feels so right. The thought of me and you might take the rest of our lives. This fight is for two. I don't give you roses all the time, so why don't we just embrace it like our own? Let me know, am I overreacting? This thing between me and you has been playing in my head. This could be something beautiful. What you're thinking, I don't know. Baby, I'm right here, so just let it go. Baby, tell me why it feels so right. The thought of me and you might take the rest of our lives. This fight is for two. I don't give you roses all the time, so why don't we just embrace it like our own? Tell me why it feels so right. The thought of me and you might take the rest of our lives. This fight is for two. Life don't give you roses all the time, so why don't we just embrace it like our own? Why don't we just embrace it like our own?
Black music. All of it. On the block.
In another life, you would be with it. That's how you see it. That's how you see it. Sleeping what you waiting for? What you wait so long? What you waiting for? Oh wait, what you waiting for? Oh no, 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 what you waiting for? Oh wait, what you waiting for? Oh no, 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 what you waiting for? In another life desire move you serious. It becomes true. See yourself as one beheld by magic. Atomic habit, a logic rule. It becomes true. Oh wait, but what you waiting for? What you wait so long? What you waiting for? Oh wait, but what you waiting for? What you wait so long? What you waiting for? Oh wait, but what you waiting for? I know, no, no, what you waiting for? Oh wait, but what you waiting for? I know, no, no, 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 what you waiting for?
That's for my fellow procrastinators. The time is now, according to Ego LMA. But you know what? I actually had a conversation about procrastination with Dominique Fils-Aimé. And she told me about this study where they found that active procrastination leads to higher levels of creativity and productivity. So maybe it's just got a bad rap. That was What You Waiting For. And with that, your show's about to be a wrap. You've been listening to The Block on CBC Music. On behalf of the team here, Perry Prince and JJ Laborde, thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Angeline Terueo. I'm going to leave you with music from Ruth B. She's another songwriter that has a signature light touch. This one was written for a film called Jazzman's Blues. And Tyler Perry said the song is meant to balance the challenging, heavy, and tragic themes in the film. He said, Ruth's voice does something to you. It's like a salve that lets you know as much tragedy as the characters went through, it's still okay. Here's Paper Airplanes. Peace. Talk soon.
You are the song that I long to hear once more. You are the light that I keep looking for. Roses are blue. If it isn't me and you, I gotta see this thing through. And I'll spend my lifetime sending paper airplanes to the moon, praying they get to you. And I'll spend the rest of my days lost in this craze for you, sending paper airplanes to the moon. Love so divine, all our memories intertwined. I found the truth in your honey eyes. Even though it's been a while, I still think about your smile. Every night before I fall asleep, I find you in my dreams, somewhere in the trees. And I'll spend my lifetime sending paper airplanes to the moon, praying they get to you. And I'll spend the rest of my days lost in this craze for you, sending paper airplanes to the moon. And if the world stops spinning, even then I'll be singing of you, of you. And when my heart stops beating, even then I'll be dreaming of you, of you. And if the birds stop singing and the rain stops falling and the sun won't shine on you, even then I won't be through with loving you. And I'll spend my lifetime sending paper airplanes to the moon, praying they get to you. And I'll spend the rest of my days lost in this craze for you, sending paper airplanes to the moon, sending paper airplanes to the moon, sending paper airplanes to the moon.
After Dark, the soundtrack to your evening on CBC Music.
Microphone check. 1, 2. Hey, it's Odario Williams, transmitting to you direct from downtown Toronto tonight. You're listening to CBC Music. This is After Dark. On this program, you'll always hear a few old school grooves for the old souls out there. And, of course, some new discoveries for the musically curious. Well, let's enjoy these sounds. And, of course, let's enjoy ourselves. We'll kick things off with Rebecca Cichon. She's coming out of Vancouver. Tune's called Ego.
I've always been bad at taking no for an answer. I'm stubborn as hell, won't give in till I get the last word. I'm just a dreamer who's put years into my footwork, but I'm missing a beat soon as I try to be quicker. If I only knew how to reach the top, would I ever know when to stop? I'm pushing and shoving, no, I just can't give it no space to breathe. This part of me can't ever let me go. I got way too much ego. I'm overwhelmed by the smallest inconvenience. Emotional as hell, but I won't back down to share what I'm feeling. Inside I'm orbit with so much ambition they hardly believe it. Gotta put ego aside, cause this moment is only fleeting. If I only knew how to reach the top, would I ever know? Would I ever know?
catchy song.
Too much ego.
Just hate to think of where we might have been if I pulled the rug and started diving in. Never hit the brakes, just keep the ride going. Really love my life, but I would die for this. I would die for this. I would die for this.
Just gonna use the bathroom before we start it.
I don't even wanna put a price on this. You won't recognize me when I commit. I promise I'ma tell it to the world I don't mind. I can be a girl, you'll be mine. Tryna be the time of your life. We can have forever tonight. I know that sometimes I'm acting like a maniac. Say something crazy, then wind up trying to take it back. I'm only comfortable acting like that with you, baby. Yeah, I said I needed a year, gave you a heart attack. It only took me a couple months to call you back. Cause it feels like heaven when I'm with you, baby. I just hate to think of where we might have been if I pulled the rug and started diving in. Never hit the brakes, just keep the ride going. Really love my life, but I would die for this. I would die for this. I would die for this. If I pulled the rug and started diving in. Never hit the brakes, just keep the ride going. Really love my life, but I would die for this. I would die for this. I would. I only wanna be by your side. I know I might be out of my mind. I really love my life, but I would die for this. Die for this. I only wanna be by your side. I know I might be out of my mind. I really love my life, but I'd die for this. Die for this. You know I would. Die for this. Die for this. Die for this. Die for this.
Great stuff by California star Syd. She clearly listened to a lot of 90s Janet Jackson before recording that. A sexy tune called Die For This. Now, you might know Syd from her band, The Internet. Well, she's also got some great solo work out, like the track you just heard. This is After Dark on CBC Music. Up next is Toronto duo Toro, a very talented duo. Now, these two have been in the game for some time now. You've got jazz pianist and songwriter Cynthia Toro working with partner and rock star Brendan Canning. You might know him from his band Broken Social Scene. Well, together they call themselves Toro. This particular tune's about the isolation of the creation process and just being in and out of relationships and, well, wanting to be alone to work, but also wanting to be with somebody. The give and take of it all. It's called Change is Strange. Here's Toro.
Feeling like a change is coming on.
were you talking about? Did I misunderstand? Am I not part of your plan? It's always, always you say. I never, never needed you anyway. Giving me a play-by-play. I never, never needed to be in your game. Like a change is coming on. It feels strange to wait this long. I was not surprised. You didn't even notice. You didn't even notice. Like a change is coming on. Don't it feel strange to wait this long? Feeling like a change is coming on. Don't it feel strange to wait this long? In another world I belong. In another world I'm alone. And I know it's all up to me, nobody else. In another world I belong. In another world I'm alone. And I know it's all up to me, nobody else. Like a change is coming on.
You're with Odario Williams, After Dark, on CBC Music.
If you were here now, I wouldn't mind. That would be okay, baby, that would be fine. But when you name the dead, they go away.
Walk with me for a while. I need your company, I need your smile. And I wouldn't mind it if you came to stay.
It's a harder shit I love tonight, but I figure that you know I'm with ya.
My sofa man is chosen. Your skin to tear me open again.
But cool out, baby, please. No one likes it when it tears in a friend. You know it, baby, all the things that you do. Hey, hey, I like to think that I know them too. Forever alone, but baby, I do it in style.
If you need to go slow, I wouldn't care. That would be okay, baby, that would be fair. But the love we made, you traded one away.
It's a harder shit I love tonight, but I figure that you know I'm with ya.